There are places where time seems to stand still. Thornwick Hollow is one of them. This ancient forest, isolated at the edge of the town of Ashwood, has nurtured countless legends across generations. And at the heart of these legends lies a house. A woman. A witch. Sarah Matthews never thought she would come to this place. 58 years of living in reason and science, teaching high school biology, explaining the natural laws that govern everything. But today, as the sun sets behind the towering trees, she finds herself seeking something beyond science. Her footsteps crunch over dead leaves, her breath comes in shallow gasps. Fear and desperation war within her chest. The house appears like a ghost among the trees. Not large, not as terrifying as the stories suggest. Just a simple wooden cabin, moss-covered, with smoke rising from a stone chimney. But there is something about this place that makes the air thick, as if the forest itself is whispering warnings. Sarah calls out, her voice trembling in the gathering darkness. The door opens with a long, protesting creak. An old woman stands in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from within. Elspeth Crane. 73 years old, with long silver hair and pale blue eyes that remain sharp despite her age. Inside, the house is another world. The scent of dried herbs, beeswax, and something older, the smell of time itself. Elspeth stands by the fireplace, the flames reflecting on her deeply lined face. She asks Sarah what she has come seeking. Illness? Love? A curse upon someone? Sarah's voice breaks as she speaks. Her daughter, Emily. Stage 4 cancer. The doctors have given her only weeks to live. Elspeth turns away, pouring tea from an old kettle into 2 cracked ceramic cups. Her movements are slow, deliberate, as if weighing something far heavier than Sarah's request. She tells Sarah that cancer is not something she can cure with herbs or medicines. This is not a simple illness that responds to folk remedies. But Sarah has heard the stories. Everyone in the surrounding counties has heard them. Elspeth is a witch. She has magic. Surely there must be something she can do. Elspeth laughs, but there is no humor in it. She asks Sarah what she thinks magic is. Does she imagine it works like a fairy tale, where one wave of a hand makes cancer disappear? Life does not work that way. Magic has laws, just like science. Laws that demand balance. Laws that require payment. But, Elspeth says, turning to face Sarah directly, there is one way. Sarah leans forward, desperate hope lighting her eyes. She will do anything, she says. Anything at all. Elspeth's gaze is piercing. She tells Sarah that people say anything too easily. They do not understand the price of anything. This is not about money. Elspeth has no need for money. The price she speaks of must be paid in time. Time, Sarah asks. What does that mean? Elspeth sits down in an old wooden chair, her eyes fixed on the flames. She asks Sarah how many years Emily has left. Weeks, Sarah repeats, her voice barely a whisper. What if, Elspeth says slowly, Emily could have 5 more years? 5 years of health, of happiness, of living fully? Sarah cannot believe what she is hearing. 5 years? Is it truly possible? It is possible, Elspeth confirms. But time cannot be created from nothing. It must be taken from somewhere. From someone. The realization dawns slowly on Sarah's face. From her. 5 years of her own life, traded for 5 years of her daughter's. Elspeth explains that Sarah will age faster. Her body will deteriorate as if she had lived those 5 additional years in a matter of months. But Emily will live. Emily will be healthy. Without hesitation, Sarah agrees. Elspeth seems surprised by the speed of her decision. Does she not need time to think about this? To consider what she is giving up? But Sarah's answer is immediate and firm. Emily is only 32 years old. She has her whole life ahead of her. Sarah has already lived. Her 5 years are not as precious as Emily's 5 years. Emily is everything to her. Something shifts in Elspeth's expression. The hardness in her eyes softens, just for a moment. She observes quietly that Sarah truly loves her daughter. Of course, Sarah replies. Emily is all she has. Elspeth rises slowly from her chair and walks to a shelf filled with jars and curious objects. She takes down a small wooden box, carved with ancient symbols. From inside, she withdraws a thin silver cord and a small vial containing something that glimmers like stardust. She tells Sarah to hold out her hand. Elspeth binds the silver cord around Sarah's wrist, then around her own. She opens the small vial and sprinkles the glittering dust onto the fire. The flames leap up, turning an eerie blue, then pure white. Elspeth speaks in a language Sarah does not recognize, old words, words that seem to resonate in the very walls of the cottage. Then, in English, she speaks the binding, by old blood and young blood, I connect two souls. Your time, my time. One takes, one gives. 5 fall, 5 rise. So shall it be. The air in the room seems to vibrate. Sarah feels a strange sensation, like something being gently pulled from deep within her chest. And then, as suddenly as it began, it is over. Elspeth unties the cord, her hands trembling slightly. It is done, she says. Emily will begin to recover by tomorrow morning. And Sarah. Sarah will feel different too. Sarah asks what she must do now. Nothing, Elspeth tells her. Go home. Be with your daughter. Treasure those 5 years. Sarah thanks her, words spilling out in a rush of gratitude and relief. But Elspeth's response is cold. Do not thank me, she says. Go. And never come back. Sarah leaves, her heart pounding with hope. But inside the cottage, Elspeth collapses into her chair, her weathered hands shaking. She stares into the fire, and for the first time in many years, tears gather in her eyes. The year was 1973. Margaret Crane, not yet called Elspeth, was only 23 years old. She lived in the town of Ashwood, working as a nurse at the local hospital. Her life was peaceful, simple, filled with dreams of the future. She was in love with Thomas, a kind man who worked as a carpenter. They planned to marry, to buy a small house by the lake, to have 3 children and 2 dogs. But dreams sometimes shatter in the cruelest ways. In 1974, Thomas was diagnosed with congenital heart disease. The doctors gave him 6 months to live. Margaret's world collapsed. She searched desperately for anything that might save him. Alternative treatments, experimental medications, anything at all. And then she heard about a woman who lived hidden in Thornwick Forest. People called her a witch. They said she could cure things that could not be cured. In her desperation, Margaret found her way to that house in the forest. The witch's name was Helena, an ancient woman who seemed as old as the trees themselves. And Helena made Margaret the same offer that Elspeth would make to Sarah 50 years later. 5 years of Margaret's life, in exchange for 5 years of Thomas's. Helena warned her. She told Margaret that everything has a price. That magic demands balance. But Margaret was young and in love and desperate. She did not ask what the full price might be. She only heard that Thomas could live. She agreed. The ritual was performed. And miraculously, Thomas recovered. He lived 5 more years. 5 happy, full years. They married. They bought their little house. Margaret became pregnant. Those 5 years were everything Margaret had dreamed of. Thomas built furniture with his own hands. They planted a garden. They prepared a nursery for their baby, painting the walls soft yellow, building a crib from scratch. Margaret felt complete. She felt blessed. But then the 6th year arrived. Thomas died in his sleep one night, peacefully, as if he were simply resting. And the child Margaret was carrying, 8 months along, almost ready to be born, did not survive the birth. Margaret returned to Thornwick Forest, shattered. She found Helena and demanded an explanation. Why? Why did she have to lose both of them? Helena's response was heavy with sorrow. She had warned Margaret, she said. Magic has a price. Margaret had taken 5 years from fate, but fate does not simply take back those 5 years. It takes everything that could have existed within those 5 years. Margaret protested. Helena had not told her this. She had deceived her. But Helena insisted she had not lied. She had told Margaret that everything has a price. Margaret had not asked what the price was. She had wanted Thomas to live, and he had lived. But the flow of time, once disturbed, has consequences. Margaret realized with horror what Helena meant. By saving Thomas, by adding 5 years to his life, she had taken those 5 years from somewhere else. From the child who should have been born. From the future that should have existed. She had not killed her child, Helena explained gently. But she had altered the natural flow of events. The universe seeks balance. Always. Helena died 1 year later, old and alone. But before her death, she passed her knowledge to Margaret. Not because she wanted to, but because Margaret demanded it. Margaret wanted to understand. She wanted to master this power. She wanted never to be helpless again. And slowly, Margaret disappeared from the town. People said she had moved away. But the truth was that she had become Elspeth Crane, the new witch of Thornwick Hollow. She lived in Helena's old cottage, isolated, learning, practicing. 50 years passed. 3 weeks passed after Sarah's visit. Emily recovered in a way that stunned her doctors. They called it spontaneous remission, a rare medical phenomenon they could not explain. Tests showed the tumors shrinking. Her strength returning. Within days, she was well enough to leave the hospital. The doctors cautioned her. They did not understand what had happened. She would need monitoring, follow-up appointments. But Emily felt better than she had in years. She felt alive. Sarah, on the other hand, aged visibly. Her hair turned more gray. New wrinkles appeared seemingly overnight. Her joints ached. She moved more slowly. But every time she saw Emily smile, every time she heard her daughter laugh, she knew she had made the right choice. Emily asked her mother what had happened. Why was she getting better when the doctors had given her so little time? Sarah told her it was a miracle. Just a miracle. Some things, she said, cannot be explained by science. Emily was too grateful to question further. She began making plans. She would return to work. She would travel. She would do all the things she had thought she would never have the chance to do. She spoke of 5 years as if it were forever. And Sarah listened, smiled, and said nothing about the price. In her cottage in Thornwick Forest, Elspeth sat in the darkness, as she had done every night for 50 years. But tonight was different. The memories would not leave her alone. She kept seeing Helena's face. Kept hearing Helena's words about consequences. About the price that goes beyond what is spoken. For the first time in decades, Elspeth felt afraid. She had done to Sarah exactly what Helena had done to her. She had offered hope, knowing that hope carried hidden costs. She had watched Sarah walk away, grateful and ignorant, just as she herself had once walked away from Helena. What would the true price be for Sarah? Would Emily truly have 5 full years? Or would fate find another way to balance the scales? Would something else be taken from Sarah, not just her years, but something more precious? These questions haunted Elspeth. For 50 years, she had performed this ritual for others. Desperate people came to her, begging for more time for their loved ones. And she had granted it, taking their years in exchange, believing she was helping them. Believing she was giving them what they wanted most. But now, thinking of Sarah's grateful face, thinking of Emily's miraculous recovery, Elspeth wondered, was she helping? Or was she simply passing on a curse, the same curse Helena had given to her? Elspeth made a decision. For the first time in 50 years, she left her cottage. She walked through the forest, down the old paths that led to Ashwood. Her joints protested. Her breath came hard. But she walked on. She needed to see. She needed to know. She needed to understand what she had truly done. She found Sarah's house by following the threads of magic that still connected them. The silver cord had been removed, but the connection remained, invisible but real. She stood outside, hidden in the shadows, and watched through the window. Inside, Sarah sat with Emily at the dinner table. They were laughing about something. Emily's color was good. She looked healthy, vibrant, alive. Sarah looked older, more tired, but her eyes were bright with joy as she watched her daughter. For a moment, Elspeth felt relief. The spell was working exactly as it should. Emily was thriving. Sarah had gotten what she wanted. But then Elspeth noticed something else. On the table was a calendar. Emily had marked off days in red, appointments, plans, things she wanted to do. 5 years' worth of dreams, all carefully mapped out. And beside the calendar was a photograph. Emily with a young man, both of them smiling, his arm around her shoulders. A boyfriend, perhaps. Or a fiancé. Elspeth understood with sudden, cold clarity. Emily would have 5 years. But what about the people in Emily's life during those 5 years? What about the man in the photograph? What about children Emily might have? What about all the connections and possibilities that would form during those 5 years? When Emily's time ran out, would fate simply let her go? Or would it claim something else to maintain the balance? Elspeth had lived with her own answer for 50 years. She had saved Thomas for 5 years. And in return, she had lost not just Thomas, but their child. Their future. Everything they could have built together. Would Emily face the same fate? Would Sarah, in 5 years, find that she had not truly saved her daughter at all, but merely delayed the inevitable while making the loss even more devastating? Elspeth turned away from the window and walked back toward the forest. But this time, she did not return to her cottage. Instead, she walked to the old cemetery at the edge of Ashwood, to 2 graves she had not visited in decades. Thomas Crane. And beside him, a smaller stone. Baby Crane. Born sleeping. Elspeth knelt before the graves, her old knees protesting against the damp ground. She spoke to them, to Thomas and to the child she had never held. She told them she was sorry. She told them she had spent 50 years trying to master the power that had taken them from her. She had thought that understanding magic would give her control. Would let her help others without the terrible costs she had paid. But she understood now that some costs cannot be avoided. Some prices must always be paid. The universe seeks balance, and magic is simply a way of borrowing against the future. The debt always comes due. As dawn broke over the cemetery, Elspeth made another decision. She would return to Sarah one more time. Not to undo the spell, that was impossible. Once time was traded, it could not be taken back. But she would tell Sarah the truth. The whole truth. About what might come in 5 years. About the hidden costs that even Sarah's sacrifice might not cover. Sarah deserved to know. To prepare. To understand that her gift to her daughter carried risks that went beyond her own aging. It would be painful. Sarah might hate her. Might curse her. But it was the right thing to do. It was what Helena should have done for Margaret all those years ago. Elspeth walked back through Thornwick Forest as the sun rose. The trees seemed less ominous in the morning light. Birds sang. Life continued, as it always did, heedless of human magic and human wishes. She reached Sarah's house just as Sarah was leaving for the hospital, another follow-up appointment with Emily. Sarah saw her and stopped, recognition and confusion crossing her face. Elspeth spoke simply. She needed to talk to Sarah. About Emily. About the spell. About what Sarah needed to know. Sarah invited her inside, though her expression was wary. They sat in Sarah's living room, in the same house where Emily had grown up, where photographs on the walls showed Emily as a baby, as a child, as a young woman. And Elspeth told her story. All of it. About Thomas. About the child she lost. About Helena and the price no one had warned her about. About 50 years of trying to do better, to help others, only to realize she might be perpetuating the same cycle of hidden costs. Sarah listened in silence. Her face went through many emotions, shock, fear, anger, despair. When Elspeth finished, Sarah sat very still for a long time. Finally, she spoke. She asked if Elspeth was saying that Emily would not truly have 5 years. That something else would be taken. Elspeth said she did not know for certain. Magic was not an exact science. Sometimes the price was exactly as stated. Sometimes it was more. She had no way of knowing which it would be for Emily. But Sarah deserved to know the risk. Deserved to understand what she had truly agreed to. Sarah was quiet again. Then she said something that surprised Elspeth. She said that even knowing this, even understanding the risk, she would make the same choice. Because 5 years of life, even 5 years that might end in more loss, was better than weeks of certain death. Emily would have 5 years of hope, of dreams, of living. Whatever came after, they would face it together. But she thanked Elspeth for telling her the truth. For giving her the chance to prepare. For not leaving her in ignorance as Helena had left Elspeth. Elspeth looked at this woman who had given 5 years of her life for her daughter, and she saw herself as she had been 50 years ago. Young, desperate, willing to pay any price. But Sarah had something Elspeth had lacked, she had been warned. She knew the risks. And she chose to move forward anyway, eyes open. Perhaps, Elspeth thought, that made all the difference. She stood to leave, but Sarah asked her to wait. She asked if Elspeth would come back. Not for magic. Not for spells. But just to talk. To share their stories. So that neither of them had to carry this burden alone. And Elspeth, who had been alone for 50 years, who had isolated herself from all human connection to avoid causing more pain, found herself agreeing. Over the following months, Elspeth visited Sarah several times. They talked about loss, about love, about the choices people make when faced with impossible situations. They talked about Emily's progress, about Sarah's accelerated aging, about the uncertainty of what would come. Emily knew nothing of these visits. Sarah kept the full truth from her daughter, wanting her to enjoy her 5 years without the shadow of dread. But Sarah found comfort in having someone who understood. Someone who had walked a similar path. And Elspeth, for the first time since Thomas's death, felt a connection to another human being. A friendship, perhaps. Or at least an understanding between two people who had both paid terrible prices for love. Time passed. Emily grew stronger. She returned to work. She married the young man from the photograph, his name was David, and he made her laugh. Sarah attended the wedding, looking far older than her 58 years, but radiating happiness for her daughter. Elspeth was not at the wedding, but Sarah told her about it later. Described the ceremony, the joy on Emily's face, the plans the young couple had for their future. And both women wondered, but did not speak aloud, what would happen when 5 years ended. Would Emily simply continue living? Would fate forget its claim? Or would something come due? Elspeth began keeping a journal. She wrote down everything she knew about the magic of time trading. Every ritual she had performed, every outcome she had observed. She documented the full story, Helena's warning, her own losses, the patterns she had seen over 50 years. She did this not for herself, but for whoever might come after. Because she understood now that this knowledge, this terrible power, would not die with her. Someone else would find it. Someone else would be desperate enough to use it. And that person deserved to know the full truth before they made the choice. She wrote it all down, including this: magic that trades time is not inherently evil. But it is dangerous, because it asks us to gamble with the future. We can never know the full price until it is too late to change our minds. And yet, when faced with certain loss, many of us will gamble anyway. The question is not whether the magic should exist. The question is whether we have the wisdom to use it knowing what it might cost. 5 years is a long time. It is also no time at all. It depends on what you do with it. How you live it. What you treasure. Sarah Matthews gave 5 of her years to her daughter, Emily. Emily lived those years fully. She laughed. She loved. She created memories. She experienced joy. And when the 5 years ended, what happened? That is a question that perhaps should not be answered. Because the answer is less important than the choice itself. The choice to love so deeply that you would give anything. The choice to embrace hope even when the odds are against you. The choice to believe that 5 years of happiness is worth whatever price might come after. Elspeth Crane, once Margaret, still lives in Thornwick Forest. Still alone, mostly. But not entirely. She has her journal. She has her memories. And she has the occasional visitor, Sarah, who comes sometimes just to sit and talk. 2 women who understand what it means to trade time for love. The forest stands eternal. The cottage remains. And the legend persists: there is a witch in Thornwick Hollow who can give you time. But she will tell you, if you ask, that time is not hers to give. It is only hers to trade. And every trade has a cost. Some costs are worth paying. Some are not. The wisdom is in knowing the difference before you make the deal. But love often makes us willing to pay any price. Even the ones we cannot see. Even the ones we cannot imagine. Because love is not about calculations and certainty. Love is about the willingness to risk everything for someone else's chance at life. That is the true magic. Not the spell. Not the ritual. But the love that makes us brave enough, or foolish enough, to say yes even when we know there will be a price. And perhaps that is enough.